When I woke, even my photographs were gone. The walls were blank where frames had hung, and the dresser drawers slid light as if they had forgotten me. I'm Margaret, 58, a widow who raised my 2 children, Evan and Claire, in this small house. They had promised to renovate it for comfort, their phrase, not mine. The coffee smelled sharp over the cedar drawers, a homely note that made the emptiness feel deliberate, not accidental. I checked the nightstand first. The jewelry box my husband carved was missing, the dent in its lid replaced by a pale square of dust. I opened the closet, expecting the quilt he stitched in late winters. Bare hangers tilted like shrugs. A half-breath later, I was in the hallway calling their names even though I knew they weren't here. "Evan?" I said, softer than I felt. Silence answered like a closed door. He had said it yesterday, easy and bright. "We'll move a few things, Mom." I remember nodding because that's what mothers do when their children use a reassuring tone. "Just storage," Claire added, a smile clipped at the edges. We stood in the kitchen with mugs between our hands, the calendar crowning the fridge, a neat week ahead. I wanted to believe in upgrades and fresh paint, not in vanishing. "I never signed anything," I said to the empty room. Saying it out loud made the room steady itself. I went to the file drawer. The mortgage folder should have been there with the first and last payment receipts, the notarized release, the letter from the bank manager who knew my husband by name. Space. Only smooth, disbelieving space. If I did nothing, I'd lose my home. My phone lit up. A text from Evan. "Contractor started early. Don't freak out." I called him. He didn't pick up. I called again, holding down the urge to leave a message I'd regret. I dialed the local notary, the gatekeeper who had handled our papers for years. He answered on the 3rd ring. I told him what I found, or didn't. He listened the way professionals do when they suspect trouble. "Come by," he said, calm but quick. "I'll pull your file and confirm what's on record." A next step, anchored and ordinary. It felt like a rail to hold. I searched the hallway closet, then the linen shelf where I kept the envelope of small deeds, insurance, the termite letter, the property boundary map. Gone. I pictured their faces when they'd said modernizing. I had heard care, they had meant control. A quiet line pressed through my thoughts. No one who loves you removes your history without asking. I found the empty hooks where the key set had hung, the spare labeled for emergencies. I thought of how keys change hands without ceremony, how trust is a metal thing you barely notice until it's missing. I thumbed through the kitchen drawer of loose batteries and rubber bands, hopeful for a misfiled scrap. Paper clips, a ball of twine, a corkscrew. Useless. I called Claire. She answered at once, breathy. "Don't panic. We took what might get dusty. We're protecting things." "Where are my papers?" I asked. A beat of air. "Safe," she said. "With us." "Bring them back," I said. "Tonight." "It's complicated," she said, the words landing like a shrug. "Trust us." A heat rose in me I didn't recognize. "I trusted you," I said, steady. "Now I want them back." "We're doing this for you," she replied. "For your future." I almost laughed. "My future needs my consent." She went quiet, and then the call clicked off as if the conversation had reached the end of a script. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and let my eyes map the void. The house felt like someone had paused it midway through a move and forgotten to come back. I took a notebook from my purse and wrote what had vanished, line by line. Not everything, just the pieces that matter in offices and disputes. I circled the word deed as if ink could make it reappear. I wrote a sentence for myself. Find proof and make it public. I drove to the notary's office, the old storefront near the post box where people line up before holidays. He met me at the counter, forehead creased. "If anything changed, it should have come through here," he said. He pulled a binder from the shelf and slid out a copy of the mortgage release he'd stamped years ago. "We'll scan this and send it to you," he said. "If someone tried to file something new, we'll see." I felt my breath settle into something like readiness. "Thank you," I said. "I need a copy I can hold." On the ride home, I kept the notebook on the passenger seat and talked to the windshield like it was a witness. "I'm not helpless," I said. "I'm not confused." The truth is simpler than the mask they want to place over it. I parked at the curb and saw that the porch light was off even though I keep it on after dusk. The front door looked ordinary, the kind of door you forget to appreciate. I tried the knob, then the key from my coat pocket, more habit than hope. Metal met metal and refused. Something shifted behind the wood, a small internal thud. My phone buzzed, a text from Evan, "Call tomorrow." I didn't answer. I pressed my palm to the door as if the grain could remember me. Evan changed the locks before sunset. They used my signature like a spare key. The sentence formed itself in my head as the bank manager slid the paper across the desk. My name curved across the bottom, bold and neat, only it wasn't my writing. The ink caught the light, smooth over grainy paper. I touched it, the texture faintly raised, and I knew someone had traced me perfectly. My throat went dry. "That's not me," I said. The man looked uneasy, adjusting his glasses. "This loan has already been approved," he murmured, "for property improvements." "Property improvements? My house." He tried to be kind. "Maybe your children signed on. Your behalf?" I shook my head. "They can't. I never gave permission." My hand trembled over the desk, feeling the paper's edge bite. That's when the smell of the office, a mix of toner and cheap coffee, hit me. I could tell he believed me but had rules to obey. "You can submit a withdrawal notice," he said. I wrote one, slow and deliberate, every letter sharp. "Effective immediately, no funds are to be released under my name." Outside, the air felt colder than before. I walked home counting my steps, 20 from the curb to the door. Control through numbers, it made me steady. Inside, the clock hummed faintly. I stared at it, watching the second hand tick away the idea of safety. My phone buzzed. Claire's name. "Mom, you sound tense," she said. "What's going on?" I told her about the forgery. Her pause stretched like elastic. Then, "You're imagining things. We'd never do that." "Then why is there a loan?" I asked. "Because you forget things," she said, tone sugar-edged. "We're fixing your house, remember?" "I remember everything," I said quietly. "I remember trust." Silence. Then she hung up. I felt something close between us, like a door slowly pushed shut. My sister June arrived an hour later. She carried muffins wrapped in a towel, her kind version of a shield. "I heard from Claire," she said. "She's worried." I laughed softly. "Worried about what? Getting caught?" June sighed. "Don't start a war. Just protect yourself." We sat at the kitchen table, papers spread between us. She aligned each page by its corner, methodical. "Keep copies of everything," she said. Her calm steadied me. "If they can forge a signature once," I said, "they can do it again." She nodded. "So, we leave them no room." That evening, I mailed a certified letter to the bank confirming my withdrawal notice. I watched the clerk stamp it, proof that somewhere a system still worked. The stamp thudded like a heartbeat. I thought of my husband, how he'd always double-checked receipts, saying, "Paper remembers when people don't." He'd been right. At home, I changed the locks myself, even though the irony stung. The new metal turned smoothly, resisting nothing. I ran my thumb over the new key's grooves and thought about how quickly access can shift. One door, one pen, one lie. As I finished tightening the last screw, the porch light flickered, then steadied, a faint promise of safety. Later that night, someone knocked. Once, twice. Slow. I froze. "Who is it?" I called. No answer, just the faint rattle of the handle. The noise stopped, replaced by stillness thick enough to hear my heartbeat. I stood there a long moment, hand still on the knob, thinking how every betrayal sounds different. The quiet ones are the worst. The next morning I called the bank to confirm they'd received my letter. The woman on the phone said yes, polite and brisk. "The withdrawal has been noted." Relief spread through me, brief and fragile. I thanked her and hung up. A moment later, another call. Same number, different voice. "Mrs. Collins, the renovation funds have been released," he said. I gripped the counter. "That's impossible," I whispered. He cleared his throat. "I'm afraid it's already processed." I stared at the locked door, sunlight spilling across the floorboards, bright and cruel, so much for boundaries. The paper I'd trusted meant nothing. The bank confirmed withdrawal, then released the funds anyway. Greed always hides behind care. That line came to me while staring at the neat printouts Tom had pulled from my account. The machine beside him whirred, printing page after page until the hum filled the kitchen. Tom was retired now, a man who once balanced ledgers for small shops, and he studied the papers with quiet focus. "They're using your house as equity," he said finally. "See this entry? It's listed as an asset contribution under their company's renovation fund." The words didn't sink in at first. Then they did, heavy and final. My home wasn't collateral. It was their currency. I leaned over the table, tracing a finger along the numbers. "This can't be legal," I whispered. Tom rubbed his chin. "It's legal if you signed for it." "But I didn't." He gave a short nod. "Then it's fraud." The printer clicked once more, spitting out a page that listed the total, $248,000. A lifetime of payments, now turned into leverage. The steady hum of the machine felt louder than any voice. I called Evan. He answered quickly. "You saw the papers," he said, not even pretending surprise. "Tom helped me read them," I said. "It's theft." He gave a small laugh that chilled me. "It's business. You wouldn't understand." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You're calling this modernization?" "We're just improving what's ours," he said. "Ours." The word landed like a slap. "I worked 40 years for this house," I said. "You can't just rename it." He sighed. "Mom, it's not a fight. It's structure." "No," I said, voice low. "It's betrayal." The line went dead. Tom printed one last copy and handed it to me. "You'll need this for any complaint," he said. The paper was still warm. I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and wrote in bold ink, "State Housing Board." It wasn't courage I felt. It was something colder, a methodical anger. Tom looked at me with a quiet sort of respect. "You're tougher than they think," he said. I nodded, though my hands shook. "Toughness doesn't pay legal fees," I replied. "Truth might," he said. The sound of hammering drifted from outside. Through the window I saw a truck backing into my yard, men unloading wood planks and cement bags. No permits, no notice, just confidence. I stepped onto the porch. "You can't build here," I said. One of them glanced at me, expression blank. "Orders from the owner." "I'm the owner." He shrugged. "Talk to your son." The way he said it, as if it were settled fact, made my stomach twist. The stakes were no longer just about walls or money. They were about erasure. Me, erased from my own property. Inside, Tom was packing his briefcase. "File the complaint tonight," he said. "Attach the summary. Don't wait." I scanned the letter one last time before sealing it. "Will this even work?" He hesitated, then said, "It puts them on record. That's how you start." I believed him because I needed to believe someone. The house groaned in the wind, boards creaking like it was listening. As evening came, the construction noise continued. Every strike of metal on wood echoed through the walls. I sat at the kitchen table, counting each hit like a slow verdict. Around the 7th, I realized what the sound meant. They weren't stopping. I made copies of the statement, one for the bank, one for my records, one for June in case things got worse. I wrote the date at the top. March 12th, 8:15 p.m. Proof needs a time. I sealed each envelope and placed them beside the phone. When I looked outside again, a new truck had arrived, city inspector stenciled faintly on its side. Hope flickered for a second. The driver stayed inside, engine running. Then he reversed, slow, the taillights fading down the road. No clipboard, no knock, no record, just departure. I stood at the window long after he left, listening to the hammering start again, steady and smug. The sound was a verdict before any court. An inspector's truck stopped outside, then drove away. They built lies faster than walls. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the boards I'd scrubbed every spring were splintered under heavy boots. The air already burned from the morning heat, and the hammering carried through it like defiance. 2 men worked without pause, tearing away what had once been mine. "You can't start without a permit," I said, voice loud enough to cut through the noise. One of them looked up, sweat on his forehead, indifferent. "We have authorization," he said. "Your son handled it." My stomach turned at the word authorization. A yellow notice flapped on the doorframe. I ripped it free, reading the fine print. It listed missing permit numbers, incomplete inspection lines, and a signature that was supposed to be mine. The page stuck to my skin, damp with heat. The ink bled faintly, like it was ashamed to be there. "Who signed this?" I asked the man. "City says it's on file," he said. "Not my problem." I walked inside, my mind racing faster than their hammers. Every strike outside felt like punctuation on a sentence I hadn't written. I dialed the municipal office. After 4 transfers, a woman finally answered. Her tone was polite, tired. "Your name's on the work order," she said. "That can't be right," I told her. "I never filed one." "Then you'll need to file a dispute in person," she replied. "Bring identification and any property papers." The line clicked off before I could ask more. The stakes were simple now. Either I moved fast, or I'd lose my home on paper before I could blink. I drove to City Hall. The heat shimmered off the pavement, bending distance like a trick. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ink, old bureaucracy and resignation. I handed the notice to the front clerk. She glanced at it, brows knitting. "Who filed this?" I asked again. "Your son's company," she said. "He listed himself as co-owner." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Co-owner by whose consent?" She didn't look up. "Maternal consent," she read flatly. I leaned closer. "Then show me that consent." She sighed, turned her screen, scrolled, and stopped. "There's no signature uploaded." I felt something cold cut through the heat. "So he filed without proof?" "Looks that way." I swallowed, the anger building in my throat. "I want to file a formal objection." She handed me a stack of forms. "You'll need an affidavit, notarized. Bring it back today if you can." Her eyes softened for a second. "These cases move fast." I nodded. "So will I." June met me in the lobby with her reading glasses and her calm, practical energy. "What now?" she asked. "Paperwork," I said. We sat in the corner beneath a flickering fan, filling each line slowly. "You're fighting fire with forms," she said with a wry smile. "It's the only weapon they respect," I answered. We finished, double-checked every name, every date. June signed as witness. When we were done, she touched my arm. "You're doing the right thing." I wanted to believe that doing the right thing still mattered. By the time we reached the notary, sweat had already soaked through the paper folder. The notary stamped the affidavit, metal seal pressing firm against the page. That sound, the click and thud, felt like a small victory. On the drive back, June was quiet until she said, "Evan's not thinking straight. Maybe Claire doesn't know everything." "Maybe," I said, "but they're old enough to know this isn't love." She nodded, eyes on the road. "They'll regret this one day. I hope they regret it before I lose everything." When I returned home, the workers were gone, but the porch was rubble. The heat shimmered off the nails scattered in the dirt. I walked around the house, counting every broken board, memorizing it like evidence. On the front door, another slip of paper waited. Inspection postponed pending ownership verification. At least that meant the affidavit had landed somewhere. I went inside, poured water into a glass, and sat by the window. The quiet felt temporary, like a held breath. The phone rang. City clerk's number. I answered, expecting confirmation of the dispute. Her voice was low, almost apologetic. "You should know," she said. "They've already filed a deed change this morning." My hand tightened on the receiver. "How?" "Filed online through the contractor registry. It's pending verification, but if it clears—" She didn't finish. I stared through the window at what used to be my porch, sunlight glaring off the debris. For the first time, the heat felt less like weather and more like warning. The city clerk whispered, "They've already filed a deed change." I lived inside envelopes and dread. Every morning they waited on the mat, stacked like a slow-moving threat. 5 one day, 7 the next. I'd tear one open, then another, each letter carrying the same message: payment demands, overdue notices, threats dressed in formality. The air felt heavy, stale from unopened mail. I lined the envelopes in a neat row across the table, trying to see order in chaos. Each bore my name in bold, accusing type. Each claimed I owed money I never agreed to spend. When I reached the 7th, my hand shook. Outstanding renovation balance, $68,400. The number might as well have been carved into my skin. I sat still for a long minute, then called the only person I trusted with anything legal. Mr. Briggs answered after 2 rings. His voice was even, slow. "Bring everything here," he said. "Every document. Don't throw a single page away." His office smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. He adjusted his glasses, light catching on the lens, and began sorting my letters into piles. "They're flooding you on purpose," he said. "Scare tactic. If they bury you in paper, you'll stop fighting." "Not this time," I said. He nodded, opening a folder. "We'll contest every cent." I watched his pen move across the page, each line a small act of defiance. He asked for numbers. I recited them one by one. Personal savings, $22,000. Property taxes paid in full, $14,500. Unauthorized loans filed, $31,900. Total, he said, tapping his calculator, $68,400. The way he said it, calm and certain, turned it from chaos into evidence. We built what he called a ledger of losses. It wasn't just math. It was proof I hadn't imagined what they'd done. I slid one envelope forward. "They're charging me for demolition work." He raised an eyebrow. "Did you agree to demolition?" "No," I said. "They tore down my porch without asking." He made a note. "Then we'll add damages." I realized this was my new life, counting, recording, responding. Every form became a step in survival. The stakes were no longer about one house. It was about not letting my children write me out of existence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by paper stacks, a single lamp casting a circle of warm light. The bulb hummed faintly. Its glow cut through the clutter, touching the photo frames, still empty, from when they'd cleared my room. I sorted the receipts again, clipping them in groups: utilities, taxes, personal purchases. I labeled each with dates, forcing order where there was none. "You always were organized," my husband's voice echoed in memory. "It'll save you one day." I never thought he'd be right like this. The phone rang mid-sort. Evan's name lit the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Why involve outsiders?" he said sharp. "Because you made me one." There was silence. "We're fixing this mess, Mom," he said, voice lowering. "You're the mess," I replied. The pause after that stretched, thick with things neither of us could take back. Then came a muttered, "You'll regret this," before the line went dead. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark again. I poured a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. The taste was bitter, grounding. I thought about June's advice: keep copies of everything. She was right. I'd started a binder labeled Proof, each section tabbed and dated. In a world where my children stole my signature, I had to build a new identity in paper form. Each document became a shield. Before bed, I called Briggs again. "What if they keep sending more?" I asked. Then we keep filing more, he said simply. They can't win by exhaustion if you refuse to quit. His words lingered long after I hung up. I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker over the lawn that used to feel like mine. The envelopes still sat on the table, silent now, but powerful in their own cruel way. I turned off the lamp, the room falling into muted shadow. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept hearing the soft thud of new mail hitting the floor, even when it wasn't there. The next morning, sunlight cut across the counter in narrow lines. I made coffee, tried to focus on something ordinary, but the phone rang before I could take a sip. It was the bank manager. His tone was clipped, official. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "your pension account has been temporarily frozen pending verification." I gripped the edge of the counter. "On what grounds?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Recent financial irregularities linked to renovation payments." My pulse hammered in my ears. "That money is my living," I said. "We'll need documentation to unfreeze it," he replied. I looked at the stack of envelopes, the mountain of proof already growing. It wasn't over. The bank froze my pension account next morning. They turned my safety net into a snare. Tuesday at the county pension office, the carpet looked tired and the chairs looked patient. A caseworker named Dana waved me to her desk and pulled up my file. The place carried the faint, sterile drift of disinfectant and ink, the kind that clings to paper long after everyone goes home. She scrolled, frowned, and turned the monitor slightly. "Your deposits aren't landing," she said. "They're being swept into an investment subsidiary managed by a name I recognize." "Say it," I told her. She exhaled. "Evans Firm." I gripped the folder in my lap, the edges biting my palms. "Show me the path." She pointed. "Deposit created, deposit redirected, destination confirmed. No codes, no jargon, just plain words that spelled theft in a language I understood. "You'll need to file a fraud complaint," she said, "and a request to restore routing." She slid 2 forms across the desk. "If you sign now, I can hand carry them." "Will it stop the sweep this month?" "It should," she said carefully, "if we move today." I caught the pause. "If it doesn't?" She glanced to the hallway where a supervisor's door stood shut. "Then we escalate." I signed, slow and deliberate, and Dana gathered the pages. "I'll make copies," she said. "Don't leave." While she walked away, I stared at the office clock's second hand and made myself breathe in even counts. The stakes were simple. If the income doesn't land, the lights go out. I am not letting them turn my life into a ledger line. She returned with a plain stack and a quiet promise. "I submitted both," she said. "Expect a response by email." She hesitated. "You might consider freezing external access at your bank." "Already tried," I said. "They froze me instead." Dana's mouth tightened. "Then you need counsel pressing from the other side." I nodded. "He's drafting affidavits." I stepped outside to call Briggs. "They're sweeping pensions to a company account," I said. "Caseworker saw it on screen." "Good," he answered. "We'll subpoena whatever we need if they stall." "They rarely say no," I said. He paused. "They love delay more than denial." His calm steadied me. "Bring me copies. I'll file to restore control and seek restitution. Today." "Today," he said. Back home, I set the folder on the kitchen table and reached for the mug that had gone cold before I left. I flipped through the bank printouts I'd collected, marking the redirects in blue. Dana's note, handwritten, lay on top. "Pension diversion observed. Restore routing request filed." I photographed each page, then placed the originals into my binder labeled Proof. Paper can be a weapon when you teach it your name. I needed numbers on record, not just outrage, so I wrote them in a clean list the way Briggs prefers. January deposit, $1,300 routed to the subsidiary. February deposit, $1,300 routed to the subsidiary. March deposit, $1,300 rerouted the same way. Bank maintenance fee, $45 attached to the diversion. Total, $3,945 due back to the pension account immediately. June stopped by, saw the stacks, and squeezed my shoulder. "You're doing everything right," she said. "Right isn't always enough," I answered. She tilted her head. "Then we get louder." I managed a thin smile. Louder and legible. When the florist arrived with white lilies and a card without a signature, I knew where they came from. I opened the door just wide enough to take the bouquet and set it on the porch rail. The perfume sat sweet and heavy in the heat. I left it there. Gifts that come with strings smell like apology and ownership at once. Dana called near closing. "Your filings are received. Routing restoration is flagged urgent." She added, softer, "I've seen this pattern. It looks like confidence, then it's collapse." On whose side? Usually the ones who do the taking. We let silence sit, not the gentle kind, the waiting kind. "Thank you," I said. "I'll keep pushing on my end." Before bed, I double-checked that my binder held every page and that each scan saved to 2 drives. That was my promise to myself. Trace the harm, then reverse it. I marked the calendar with a deadline and set my phone on the table, screen down. When it buzzed, I flipped it over, expecting a receipt, a form, a date. Instead, a single text pulsed on the glass, no name attached. Drop it or lose everything. They made me the villain of my own house. The paper slid under my door before dawn, thin and deliberate. Its edges curled in the damp air. I bent to pick it up, already dreading the headline I hadn't yet seen. Elder Hoarder blocks family renovation. My hands trembled, the ink smudging faintly against my fingers. The photo beside it was of my home, cropped to make it look neglected, windows shadowed, porch half destroyed from the work they'd started. The story quoted anonymous sources, describing me as confused and combative. Anonymous. I didn't need names to know who had spoken. I made coffee I couldn't drink. The cup clinked softly against the counter. The article called me unstable, implied my children had stepped in to protect the property from mismanagement. It framed betrayal as duty. Each line rewrote my life without permission. I read it twice, as if the second time might correct itself. Instead, it sank deeper. By 9, the phone began ringing, neighbors checking in, pretending concern, tasting gossip in every word. I said little. "Thank you." "I'm fine. It's a misunderstanding." When I hung up, I stared at the window, watching condensation run down the glass. I wondered how quickly a story can erase a person. By afternoon, a knock. I opened the door to a woman with a press badge clipped to her collar. "I'm from the local paper," she said. Her eyes flicked past me, measuring the space. I wrote the piece. My breath caught. "Then you'd better see what you got wrong," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated, then entered, notebook ready. "You don't seem—" She stopped. "Unstable?" I finished for her. She flushed. "We received documentation from your son's firm, statements, bank copies. They claimed you withdrew consent." "Did you ask me?" I asked quietly. "Would you like to?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd signed forms I never saw again. The clock ticked loud enough to fill the silence. I slid the complaint letter I'd filed with the housing board across to her. "Read that, then listen." I pressed play on my phone, the recording from a call I'd made to Evan weeks earlier. His voice crackled through. "Stop making this harder, Mom. We can't undo the filings now." Her pen paused mid-word. "He said filings," she murmured, "not plans." I nodded. "Filings," I repeated. "For profit, not for me." She looked up. "May I record you?" "You already are," I said, gesturing to the small recorder light blinking red in her hand. "Keep it running." I told her about the loan, the forged papers, the pension diversion. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears before the first headline. When I finished, she said softly, "You realize publishing your side might escalate things." "It already has," I said. "This house used to be my safety. Now it's their campaign." A sudden noise cut through, the sharp slam of a car door. We both turned toward the window. Evan's voice carried from the yard, sharp, impatient. "You can't talk to her," he shouted. Get off my property! The reporter froze. I lifted my phone, still recording. Your property? I said through the screen door. You signed it to yourself. That's not ownership, it's theft. He pointed toward me, fury rising. You're not well. Everyone knows it. I met his gaze. Then why do you sound so nervous? He stormed off, the tires spinning gravel as he left. The sound lingered like proof of guilt. The reporter stopped recording. You have enough here for a counter-story, she said, and something stronger. What's that? A voice, she replied. They took your papers. Don't let them take your narrative, too. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like air returning to my chest. She promised to verify everything, to bring it to her editor. If he refuses, I asked. Then I'll leak it myself, she said. Her confidence startled me. Not pity, resolve. That night, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. I stood by the window, watching drops streak across the glass like applause. The sound filled the house, washing through the corners where silence had grown thick. I sent the audio clip of Evan's outburst to Briggs. His reply came within minutes. Keep everything. We'll use it. The reporter texted once before midnight, just a single line. Editors reviewing. Stay strong. I left the newspaper folded on the counter beside the coffee cup, its headline fading under the damp air. In the morning, a new message arrived. The reporter's editor received a cease and desist from Evan. Truth changes shape when spoken, aloud. The sergeant hit play, and Evan's voice filled the small interview room. It's already mine. The words echoed flat and certain, no hesitation, no guilt. The air in that room turned sharp, colder somehow. I watched the officer's face as he paused the recording, scribbling notes in a narrow-lined notebook. The recorder sat between us, tiny, almost ordinary, yet heavy with proof. We've authenticated the file, he said. It's admissible. That word, admissible, felt like air after drowning. For months, everything I said had been called emotional. Now, finally, it was factual. He leaned forward. We'll open a formal inquiry. You'll need to provide every related document, deed copies, loan notices, bank correspondence. Once verified, we'll classify this under property fraud. I nodded, sliding a folder across. Everything's dated, color-coded, I said. He smiled faintly. You're more organized than most claimants. That's what they underestimated, I replied. For the first time, my voice didn't shake. Outside the station, the afternoon heat hit like a wave. My pulse slowed as I walked toward the car, file pressed against my chest. I wasn't free, but I wasn't voiceless anymore. I sat inside, breathing against the steering wheel, until my hands stopped trembling. The stakes were changing. Proof now had power, and that made me dangerous to them. By evening, my phone buzzed. Evan's name again. The first text read, "We can fix this quietly." Then another, "Don't drag outsiders into family matters." A third followed minutes later. "You'll regret this." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then set it down. Silence was the best boundary I had left. 10 minutes later, another message. "You made me do this." I didn't respond. I took screenshots, saved them to the folder. Briggs had told me, document everything. Emotion fades, evidence doesn't. The next morning, I met Briggs at his office. He adjusted his glasses and listened as I played the same recording the sergeant had authenticated. Evan's voice filled the room again, smaller through the speakers, but still certain. "It's already mine." Briggs didn't flinch. "That's intent," he said. "You couldn't buy a stronger line if you scripted it." I almost laughed. "You think this will be enough?" "Enough to start," he said. "The rest is time and paperwork. They'll try to drag you through delays, counterclaims, character attacks. You stay steady." I told him about the new texts. He jotted down the timestamps. "They'll try remorse next," he said. "Then intimidation. It's a cycle." "And when that fails?" I asked. "They stall until you break, so don't." He looked up. "You already survived worse." I nodded. though the weight behind his words lingered longer than comfort could erase. That afternoon, a patrol car idled near my curb. A uniformed officer stepped out, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Collins?" he called. I met him halfway. "You've got an active investigation under property seizure protocol," he said, handing me a paper. Across the top, "Temporary seizure notice, pending legal review." My knees almost buckled reading it. "So what does this mean?" I asked. "For now, it means no one can alter or sell the property until the case resolves." His tone softened. "It's a protective action. Keeps things in place." "For how long?" 60 days, renewable." I nodded, gripping the page. "Thank you," I said quietly. He gave a small, reassuring nod. "You did the right thing." When he left, I stood in the driveway, staring at the notice stapled to the post. The paper fluttered faintly, catching the early evening breeze. I traced the printed seal with my fingertip, the official mark of pause. My home, once stripped, contested, mocked, was now frozen in law, not theft. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had taken everything but left just enough evidence to lose it all. I walked inside and called June. "They marked the property," I said. "Police order," she gasped. "So it's protected?" "For now." I could hear her exhale, relief mixed with fear. "You sound steady," she said. "Because for once," I answered, "the truth isn't something I have to defend, it's something they'll have to explain." She was quiet a moment. "You really think they'll stop?" "No," I said, "but I think they're scared." As the day dimmed, I sat near the window, the recorder still on the table beside me, its red light dark now. I thought of every word Evan had said, every denial, every rewrite of history. Proof had finally pierced the story they built around me. It wouldn't restore what was lost, but it changed the balance. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one being investigated. They were. Outside, the notice flapped again, a small, official sound of justice beginning. Police marked the property with a temporary seizure notice. They tried to declare me incompetent. The phrase hung in the air like smoke I couldn't wave away. Briggs spread the papers across his desk, each stamped with official seals. The page on top bore the heading "Petition for Guardianship." Beneath it, in neat legal type, was Claire's name. My breath caught halfway in my chest. "She signed this," I said. "She's asking the court to take control of your finances," Briggs confirmed. His tone was calm, but his knuckles whitened as he turned another page. "They're framing it as concern for your well-being." I stared at the printed words, diminished capacity, as though they described someone else entirely. When we walked into the courthouse that morning, light streamed through the tall windows, sharp and deliberate, landing directly on the long oak table where petitions waited. The brightness felt cruel, showing too much. A clerk guided us to a small conference room where an advocate waited, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Lorne," she introduced herself, her voice even and unhurried. "The court assigned me to assess your ability to manage your affairs." She gestured toward the seat across from her. "This isn't a trial," she said, "but it will decide whether one happens." I sat down, folder steady in my lap. "Do you understand what's been filed against you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you understand the implications?" "That they want to take what's left of my autonomy," I answered. Her eyes flicked toward Briggs, who nodded for me to continue. I laid out each proof I had, the copies of deeds, bank transfers, complaint receipts. "These," I said, "were signed and filed by them, not me." She scanned the papers, pausing when she reached Evan's signature. "You kept everything?" she asked. "Every single thing," I replied. "They've mistaken silence for weakness." She leaned back slightly. "Tell me why your children would do this." I exhaled slowly. "Because money changes love faster than time does." Her expression shifted, sympathy mixed with professional restraint. She took a note, her pen scratching softly against the clipboard. I watched the pen glide, wondering how many people before me had been written into these margins. their lives condensed into short phrases like lucid, disoriented, or fit for guardianship. Midway through, she closed the file and looked directly at me. "You're far more organized than they hoped," she said quietly, "and far more aware." She stood and stepped toward the door. "I'll be submitting my preliminary report this afternoon." Briggs followed her out briefly, then returned, sliding his glasses higher on his nose. "That went well," he said, "but they'll push harder." "I expect them to," I said. "They need me powerless to stay comfortable." We walked into the courtroom proper, the echo of our footsteps chasing itself up the marble walls. Claire and Evan sat together at the other table, whispering. Claire didn't look at me until the bailiff called the session to order. When she did, her eyes were cold, rehearsed. The judge entered, taking his seat beneath the state seal. "We're here to determine preliminary capacity," he announced. My pulse thudded in rhythm with the clock behind him, each tick louder than the last. Claire's attorney spoke first, reading statements about erratic behavior and emotional distress. I watched his mouth move, detached, as if narrating fiction. Then Ms. Lorne rose. "Your Honor, I recommend a temporary pause on this petition," she said. "Preliminary review suggests the respondent is capable of managing her own affairs. Further evaluation is warranted before any control is reassigned." The courtroom murmured. Even the clerk looked up. Claire's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "Noted," he said. "We'll reconvene after the review." I felt the tension in my shoulders loosen slightly. Briggs leaned over. "You held ground today," he whispered. "They'll regroup, but they can't claim confusion anymore." I nodded, watching Evan's jaw tighten. He gathered his papers roughly, muttering something to Claire I couldn't hear. The judge's assistant began scheduling follow-ups, his voice crisp, detached. The courtroom clock ticked again, reminding me that every minute counted. Outside, the sunlight had shifted, gentler now, brushing against the courthouse steps as if unaware of what had just unfolded inside. Ms. Lorne caught up to me at the doors. "I'll file my recommendation by end of day," she said. "You'll receive a copy." I thanked her. "Be ready," she added. "They'll try to discredit you before the next hearing." "I've lived through worse reputations," I said. She smiled briefly. "That's why you'll win." Briggs handed me the case summary. "We bought time," he said. "Time to make the truth louder than their lies." I nodded, tracing the embossed court seal at the top of the folder. It glimmered under the afternoon light, like a faint promise of fairness. But I knew better than to trust symbols. Real justice required endurance. I tucked the folder under my arm, feeling its weight as both burden and proof. When we reached the bottom of the courthouse steps, Briggs checked his phone. His brow tightened. "Judge moved fast," he said. "Public hearing, 10 days from now." I looked up at the building's tall windows, each one reflecting the pale sky back at me. "Then they'll finally have to speak their lies out loud," I said. He nodded once. "And you'll be there to answer." The clock above the courthouse door struck noon, sharp and final. The judge scheduled a public hearing within 10 days. They faced me, but the town was watching. By 10 a.m., the benches were full and the hallway murmured like a hive. The hum of voices rose and fell, and the scrape of chairs sounded like someone sharpening a blade. I stood behind counsel table, palms flat, breathing in counts I could keep. If I lose here, I lose my home. A bailiff called the room to order. The gavel answered with a single heavy knock. The judge regarded us over half-moon glasses. "We'll hear the petitioner," he said. Their lawyer started with practiced pity. A frail woman, confused, resistant to help. My jaw tightened. He spoke of safety and family duty, stringing gentle words through a hard snare. "We ask the court to protect her from herself." The sentence drifted toward me like smoke, meant to sting without leaving a mark. "Your response," the judge said. Briggs rose and kept it simple. "Paper and voice," he said. "Not feelings." He handed up the notarized, a fight of it that swore I had never granted consent. Then he produced the audio. "Evan, calm and certain. It's already mine." A low ripple moved through the benches. Someone whispered, "There it is." Across the aisle, their counsel frowned, as if a corner had just been pulled off their cover. My turn. I stepped to the lectern and spoke the line I had rehearsed alone at the kitchen sink. I never gave them consent. The words were steady. They used my name like a pass. The courtroom settled into a listening silence that felt earned, not given. The judge nodded once. Proceed. Confrontation crested in short waves. Objection, hearsay. Authenticated recording, Briggs said. Objection, prejudicial. Highly probative, he replied. The judge lifted a hand. Overruled. A pause, a pen scratch, a door opening that had been painted shut for months. From 2 rows back came a small chorus, not loud, but honest enough to carry, "Check the signatures." She's right. That voice is his. The judge glanced toward the seats, and the murmurs thinned to a respectful hush. I kept my eyes forward, because turning would mean asking for permission to exist. I don't need permission to tell the truth. Their lawyer pivoted to character. Neighbors report instability, a pattern of erratic choices. He lifted the newspaper, that neat little blade. Before he could swing it, the reporter stood at the aisle's end, waiting to be called. Briggs nodded. We have a correction draft and a recording of the interview, he said. The judge accepted the paper, glanced at the first paragraph, then placed it beside the affidavit. We'll treat this as proffered context, he said. Thanks, counsel. He leaned toward me. Do you understand these proceedings? Perfectly, I said. Do you understand the remedy you seek? Protection of title and restoration of funds. My voice sounded like it came from a steadier woman, maybe the one I was before all this began. He wrote for a long moment and then looked to their table. Counsel, anything more? Evan's lawyer spread empty hands. Claire stared at the floor as if it might open. Briggs angled a question I didn't expect. Why did you wait this long to fight? I took a breath. Because love confuses the first few weeks. Then the bills arrive. A few heads nodded. I felt something shift, not pity, alignment. It's strange how a room turns when it recognizes a plain sentence. The judge straightened. Interim orders, he said, voice carrying to the far wall. First, the accounts of the petitioner's firm are frozen pending final ruling. Second, interim restitution is required to ensure basic support remains uninterrupted. Somewhere behind me, a soft "finally" slipped out. Evan's jaw moved as if working a stubborn seed from his teeth. One last flare from their counsel. This will ruin them. The judge didn't blink. This will preserve equity while we decide who ruined whom. The clerk typed, the keys crisp and busy, turning this morning into lines no one could edit later. I felt my legs tremble, not from fear, from release. The weight was still there, but it rested on more than my shoulders now. The judge capped his pen. You'll all return for formal ruling, he said, and you'll bring anything I haven't yet seen. He looked at me, then at the stack before him. The room held still long enough for everyone to hear what came next. The judge demanded full repayment within 30 days. 30 days later, silence broke with a knock. I had been expecting it, though the stillness before it felt stretched and unfamiliar. The sound echoed through the hallway, not urgent, but deliberate, final in its rhythm. I opened the door to find a uniformed bailiff standing there, holding a thick envelope stamped with the court's seal. He said my name and extended the paper as though returning something sacred. I signed the acknowledgement line, my hand steadier than it had been in months. The paper was heavy, textured, justice printed on fine stock. I could feel the ridges beneath my fingertips, embossed letters pressing back like proof that this time the world had listened. Property and funds returned to Margaret Collins, the bailiff read aloud. His tone carried no ceremony, yet the words landed like a bell. I traced the sentence again, quietly, the weight of it soaking in. The judgment included repayment, $68,400 plus penalties. For once, the numbers didn't bleed red. They held balance. When he left, I stood at the threshold, the same place where threats had been delivered, lies exchanged, and hope nearly abandoned. Outside, the air felt new, lighter somehow. Moments later, I saw them walking up the path, Evan and Claire. No entourage, no arrogance left to hold up. Just two figures who once called this place home. They stopped short of the step. Evan's shoulders slumped, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Claire looked at the ground, then at me. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "You signed every page," I replied. She nodded. "He said it was only to protect you." I watched Evan flinch, barely. "Protect me," I said. "You took everything I built and called it help." He met my eyes for the first time in weeks. "We thought we were saving what was left," he said. "You were saving yourselves." My words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Truth doesn't raise its voice. It stands there until the other side falls silent. Claire reached into her bag, pulling out a folded check. "It's all there," she said, with interest. I didn't take it immediately. "It's the law that demands it," I said. "Not me." She hesitated. "I'm sorry." I looked past her to the house. "Sorry doesn't rebuild what trust destroys," I said. She nodded again, eyes wet, but didn't argue. Some wounds stop bleeding long before they start healing. Evan stepped forward, words catching behind his teeth. "If you ever need—" I cut him off. "I won't." The silence that followed was cleaner than any apology could ever be. They lingered a moment longer, waiting for something I didn't have to give. I turned slightly, leaving the door half open, but my heart closed. "You should go," I said. "There's nothing left to win here." They turned and walked down the path, their shadows shrinking with each step. I watched until they reached the gate. The bailiff's car still idled nearby, engine low and steady. The official copy of the ruling sat on my table, its pages faintly curled from handling. For months, I had lived under paperwork meant to strip me bare. Now, a few sheets of the same kind had given everything back. Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and wood polish. I ran my hand along the banister, the same one Evan once helped me sand years ago. Each groove carried a memory, of laughter, of plans, of slow betrayal. The place felt both empty and redeemed. Justice doesn't fill rooms. It clears them of lies. I opened the window and let the breeze move through, stirring curtains that had hung too still. Then I heard it, a soft metallic clink on the porch. I stepped outside. On the step lay a single brass key, the same one Evan used to keep on his ring. He must have dropped it or maybe left it on purpose. Either way, it caught the morning light before settling still. I looked at it, the last trace of shared ownership, then closed the door behind me. They left, but a single key remained on the step. Victory feels quiet when walls remember. The first day back, I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by space that used to hold laughter, arguments, and the echo of slammed doors. The air carried a faint trace of lemon polish and dust, the scent of something scrubbed clean but not yet healed. The floors creaked under my steps as though testing my right to walk freely again. I ran my hand along the wall, the paint slightly rough where repairs had covered what once was cracked. Justice had restored the structure, but not the life that filled it. A knock on the door startled me, soft but insistent. It was the delivery from the therapist's office, an envelope with intake papers and a note. First session next week. I sat down at the empty kitchen table and unfolded the form. Describe your current state in one line. My pen hesitated, then wrote, I am rebuilding, but the foundation still trembles. The handwriting looked unfamiliar, like someone older and quieter than I remembered being. The questions asked about trauma, coping, sleep. I skipped the one about forgiveness. When I met the therapist later that week, her tone was measured, steady. Have you considered contact with your children? She asked. Not yet, I said. Why? Because healing needs space, I answered. And silence. She nodded slowly. You've been fighting for so long, it might feel strange to stop. I let out a small laugh that didn't quite reach my chest. "Victory isn't loud," I said. "It's just not losing anymore." The room was warm, but my hands stayed cold. She made a note, then asked if I'd like to invite them into future sessions. "Not yet," I repeated. When I returned home, I brewed tea for one and watched the steam curl upward before disappearing. On the counter sat the court's stamped order in its frame, beside a single unlit candle. I kept meaning to throw it away, but couldn't. It reminded me of how close I'd come to losing not just the house, but the sense of being seen by anyone at all. I lit the candle, its faint glow brushing against the old quilt folded over the arm of a chair. That quilt had survived the storm of movers, lawyers, inspectors, stitched fragments of years that didn't belong to anyone else. Later that night, I opened the cedar chest in the bedroom. Most of what once filled it was gone, letters shredded, trinkets sold to cover fees. But one photograph remained. Me and my husband, decades ago, standing under sunlight that looked almost golden now in memory, his arm around my shoulders, his smile wide, his trust in the moment complete. I placed the photo by the window. Morning light would find it first, before anything else. I whispered, "We made it back," though I wasn't sure who I meant by we. Each morning after, I made a small ritual of it, wiping dust from the frame, lighting the candle, writing a single line in a notebook. Still here. Some days the words felt like defiance, others like surrender. My therapist called it processing. I called it survival in slow motion. The walls still carried ghosts of voices, Claire's plea, Evan's threat, but they grew softer, almost like stories told about someone else. It's strange how a place can hold memory without choosing sides. The neighborhood had changed during the chaos. New families moved in, lawns trimmed, laughter spilling from porches. I caught glimpses of life continuing, and though it stung at first, it also steadied me. Time wasn't pausing to wait for my forgiveness. It kept moving forward, pulling me with it, whether I agreed or not. I thought about the therapist's words. "You've lived in reaction. Now, live in response." I wasn't sure I understood yet, but I was learning. One afternoon, I found the intake form again on the kitchen counter, edges curled. At the bottom, under goal of treatment, I had written, "To feel at home in my own name." I hadn't noticed it before. I traced the line with my finger and smiled faintly. The paper smelled faintly of lemon from the polish I'd used earlier that day, proof that the scent of something new could live inside, something old. The mail slot clattered. I walked over, expecting bills or advertisements. Instead, a single envelope lay on the mat, cream paper, handwritten address. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a short note on thick stationery. "We're covering stories of local resilience. May I interview you about your case?" The signature belonged to the reporter who once called me unstable. My heart paused between anger and pride. I looked at the framed judgment on the wall, then back at the letter in my hands. The past was calling again, but this time I would decide the volume. A letter arrived from a local journalist requesting an interview. Telling the story made it real again. The reporter sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once signed papers that nearly erased me. Her recorder blinked red, steady as a heartbeat. The air carried the faint chill of early autumn, a quiet reminder that seasons move on whether we're ready or not. I poured 2 cups of tea, the warmth rising in slow curls between us. "Ready?" she asked. "I think so," I said. This time, I didn't need to rehearse the truth. She opened her notebook. "I'd like to begin with what you lost," she said. I looked past her toward the window, where the rebuilt porch stretched under soft morning light. "I lost time," I said, "and the illusion that family is unbreakable." She wrote that down without looking up. "Was it about money?" she asked. "No," I said. "It was about respect, about who gets to decide what my life is worth." Her pen slowed. "You don't sound angry." I smiled faintly. "Anger burns too fast. I've had to live in the ashes long enough to know it doesn't rebuild anything." She nodded, eyes softening. The room felt still for a moment, almost suspended. Outside, leaves drifted across the steps, rustling like whispers of things forgiven, but not forgotten. We talked for over an hour, about the court hearings, the false guardianship, the smear campaign that made neighbors cross the street to avoid me. I told her about the bailiff's knock, the judgment letter, the silence afterward. "It wasn't victory," I said. "It was survival with paperwork." She chuckled gently at that, though her expression stayed grave. "That line might make it in," she said. "Good," I replied. "Someone should hear it." Halfway through, she asked if I regretted taking the fight public. "Not anymore," I said. The truth needed daylight. She glanced around the room, perhaps noticing how bare the walls still were. "And what comes next?" I thought for a moment. "Peace," I said. "It's quieter than I expected, but I'll take it." She turned off the recorder and stood, stretching slightly. "Thank you," she said. "Your story, it's going to help people." I handed her the teacup she'd left half-finished. Help them believe or help them prepare? She smiled. Both, maybe. As she stepped onto the porch, the air felt sharper. "It's cooling down fast," she said. "Autumn came early this year." "Mercy often does," I answered. She hesitated at the door, then left without another word. That Sunday, the article ran across the middle pages of the local paper. "Mother wins, back her home." My photograph filled half the space, me standing before the porch, arms loosely crossed, expression somewhere between tired and proud. I read it once, then again, slower. Her words were fair, factual, but threaded with quiet empathy. "Respect, not revenge," she quoted. Seeing it printed gave the phrase weight I hadn't realized it carried. By afternoon, the phone started ringing. Friends, distant cousins, even the neighbor who'd once called me unstable. They said they'd read the piece, that it opened their eyes. I thanked them all, but didn't linger on the calls. What mattered more were the small gestures. Someone left flowers by the gate, a basket of apples on the porch, and for the first time in over a year, the mailman waved. I walked outside and looked down the street. Children played near the curb where the construction trucks used to idle. The town seemed softer, like the story had scrubbed a layer of cynicism off its face. One woman passing by slowed her step and said, "We're proud of you." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Justice, when it finally comes, doesn't roar. It hums under your breath and moves on. Back inside, the house felt warmer, though the air carried that edge of change that comes before winter. I sat in the same chair where the interview had begun, the cup of tea now cold beside me. The newspaper lay open on the table, edges already curling. I thought about how public truth changes private memory, how telling it once can free you from telling it again. Evening settled, and I gathered the day's mail from the box near the road, bills, a flyer, and one plain white envelope with my name written in familiar handwriting. I froze. Claire. The ink slightly smudged, the corner creased. I hadn't seen that handwriting since the guardianship petition. My pulse quickened, torn between dread and curiosity. The flap was sealed, untouched, the letter waiting like a question only I could decide to answer. I carried it inside, set it next to the newspaper, and stared for a long time. I found Claire's unopened letter in the mailbox. I kept the key as a reminder, not a weapon. It lay beside the coffee cup on the windowsill, catching the first stretch of morning light. The house was quiet, still half asleep, but not lonely. I'd learned the difference. The same object that once locked me out now rested under my hand like proof that I'd returned on my own terms. I turned it over slowly, tracing its edges. It wasn't sharp anymore, just solid, ordinary, mine. Sunlight moved across the kitchen table, soft but certain. I brewed coffee the way I used to before everything fell apart. 2 scoops, no rush. The smell filled the room, simple and grounding. On the wall above the sink, the photograph had been moved again, just slightly, to catch the new angle of light. I didn't mind its unevenness. Imperfection had become its own kind of symmetry. Later that week, I joined a local support circle, a small group for seniors learning to safeguard their homes and rights. The meeting took place in the library's community room, folding chairs set in a neat half-circle. A volunteer handed me a laminated membership card, my name printed cleanly across it. "Welcome," she said. "You've been through something, haven't you?" I smiled. "Yes," I said, "and I don't intend to go through it alone again." The card felt cool in my palm, lighter than any document I'd signed in court, but heavier with meaning. During introductions, one man talked about his son pressuring him to sell the family farm. A woman mentioned a niece borrowing her savings. Their voices trembled in familiar ways. When it was my turn, I stood and said, "It's not just about property. It's about dignity, about making sure you're never treated like a visitor in your own life." The room was silent for a moment, then someone clapped softly. It wasn't applause, it was recognition. Shared survival sounds quiet, but it carries far. After the session, a volunteer asked if I'd consider mentoring new members. "You've seen the system from both sides," she said. I hesitated, thinking of all the hours spent filling forms, waiting outside offices, trying to be believed. "I'll do it," I said, "but I won't tell them what to do. I'll just tell them what I wish I'd known sooner." She nodded. "That's enough." Walking home, I passed the courthouse where everything had begun. Its steps gleamed in the early light, polished but indifferent. I stopped at the edge of the path, half expecting the same weight in my chest. Instead, there was nothing, just air. The silence that once felt punishing now felt like space to breathe. Back inside, I set the membership card next to the key on the sill. 2 small proofs of different kinds, one earned through law, the other through choice. I realized I'd spent so long defending the idea of home that I'd forgotten it could be shared. That afternoon, I called the community group and offered to host a monthly meetup here. "We'll fit," I told them. "There's more room than it looks." By evening, the sun had dipped lower, spilling across the photograph by the window. The same photo I'd once taken out of a cedar chest, the one that outlived every betrayal. My husband's smile seemed warmer now, less frozen by memory. I whispered, "We made it," though I wasn't sure if I meant us or me. Maybe both. Maybe that was enough. I sat with my coffee and thought about everything the past year had carved away. Trust, comfort, even my name for a while, but also what it left behind. Endurance, clarity, a steady refusal to vanish. The key gleamed once more, a flicker of gold against the glass. I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket. "You're staying with me," I said quietly, but not to guard, just to remind. Outside, the sky lifted into full daylight. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor laughed, and the sound carried faintly through the open window. I didn't close it. I didn't need to. The house stayed quiet, but my voice didn't. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.